Welcome to Devotionary, where we make the Bible accessible and applicable. Absalom was a man on a mission, and he had well-crafted plans in place that would ensure that his ambitions were fully realized. He had seen a flaw in his father's reign as king, and he was more than ready and fully willing to exploit it, all for his own personal benefit. Absalom, unlike his father David, was not a man after God's own heart. His heart beat fast for one thing only, himself. He was selfish and self-centered. Everything he did was aimed at elevating himself, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make a name for himself. He was motivated by selfish ambition, but also a less than healthy dose of disdain for his father. And in 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 7 through 12, we'll see just how far this ambitious young man was willing to go to bring down his father and place himself on the throne of Israel. He knew the power of words, and he was more than willing to put them to use in his quest for power, prominence, and payback. Another 4 years would pass before Absalom made the next move in his plan to overthrow his father and take the throne of Israel. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, which came out somewhere between 300 and 246 BC, has the time length of Absalom's wait as 40 years. But this would seem to be a scribal error, because that length of time doesn't fit in with the chronological circumstances surrounding the story. But during his wait, Absalom had been anything but idle. He was carefully and craftily planning for the day when he would launch his attempt at a coup. And the day had arrived. Absalom requested permission from David to return to Hebron, the town in which he was born, in order to offer sacrifices to God. The reason he gave for this trip was that it was in keeping with a vow he had made to God while he had been in exile in Geshur. He had promised God that in exchange for his safe return to Jerusalem, he would offer sacrifices to him in Hebron. Now it seems to escape David's notice that Absalom had waited at least 6 years to keep his vow to God. There had been plenty of time for him to go to Hebron. Why now? But this question doesn't seem to cross David's mind. He gave Absalom his permission and his blessing, saying, "Go in peace." 2 Samuel 15, verse 9. Little did David know that his son was plotting his overthrow. As soon as Absalom got David's okay, he sent out spies to all the tribes of Israel in order to prepare for the next phase of his plan. These men were to spread the news of Absalom's coup by telling the people, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, 'Absalom is king at Hebron.'" 2 Samuel 15, verse 10. He had established a network of spies throughout the kingdom that would help announce the news of his kingship as soon as the time was right. This little tidbit of information seems to indicate that Absalom had been winning over the hearts of the people throughout Israel, not just within the walls of the city of Jerusalem. He had been busy priming the pump and preparing the people for his takeover of David's kingdom, and it would begin with his inauguration as king in Hebron. Absalom had invited 200 guests to join him. We're not told who these individuals were, but they were most likely influential leaders and individuals with whom he had established close relationships. The text tells us that they were ignorant of his plan. They went in their innocence and knew nothing. 2 Samuel 15, verse 11. But when Absalom sent for Ahithophel, one of David's personal counselors, to join him in Hebron, it would seem to indicate that there were others involved in the plot. This whole thing had been well planned and carefully orchestrated. And we're told, the conspiracy grew strong, and the people with Absalom kept increasing. 2 Samuel 15, verse 12. Once again, we see Absalom biding his time. His was going to be a coup based on a strong public relations strategy. He was going to win through insinuation and incitement. He was going to defeat the mighty David through the spreading of rumors and the instilling of doubt. He was slowly setting himself up as the rightful and logical replacement for David, the not-to-be-trusted king of Israel. He was busy portraying David as immoral and unjust, an incompetent leader and uncaring judge of his people. Absalom would win the kingdom without ever having to draw a sword or fight a single battle. He would win this war in the court of public opinion. He would take advantage of the people's discontentment and foment increasing dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs. If Absalom had been given the benefit of the power of social media as we know it today, his efforts would have taken far less time. We know firsthand just how destructive and effective words can be. Whether it's a Facebook post criticizing the current administration or a Twitter feed promoting a new product, these seemingly innocuous bits of information are ubiquitous. They're a regular and ordinary part of our lives. We've seen careers ruined, political campaigns derailed, rumors become reality, lies be taken as truth, and uninformed opinions shared in ignorance and without discretion. Absalom understood the power of words. He knew the destructive nature of innuendo and insinuation. Given enough time, he would be able to take down the most powerful man in the kingdom without a fight. David's reputation would be destroyed, and his throne taken by a war of words and an onslaught of rumors, half-truths, and intimations regarding his leadership and moral character. But so much of it had been the result of David's own sinful indiscretions and indecisive reactions to the events surrounding his life. He had brought this on himself. Absalom had simply exploited David's weaknesses, and his determination to do so, to his own father, revealed the degree of his dissatisfaction and disdain for David. He was a son who had long ago lost any respect or regard for his own father. He saw David not as a dad to be honored, but as an unfit king who deserved to be taken down. David would later write in one of his psalms, "O God, you take no pleasure in wickedness. You cannot tolerate the sins of the wicked. Therefore the proud may not stand in your presence. For you hate all who do evil. You will destroy those who tell lies. The Lord detests murderers and deceivers." Psalm 5, verses 4 through 6. Absalom was wicked and proud. He was a murderer and deceiver. He was a liar and a lover of evil. And as we'll see, his plan to overthrow his father and take his throne would be successful. But God would have the last word. In the book of Proverbs, compiled by Solomon, God's chosen successor to David's throne, we read the following words: "The plans of the godly are just. The advice of the wicked is treacherous. The words of the wicked are like a murderous ambush, but the words of the godly save lives." Proverbs 12, verses 5 through 6. While David had made many mistakes and had brought on himself much of what was happening, he was still a man after God's own heart. He still longed to serve his God and care for the kingdom he had been given to rule and reign over. He had not always done it well or with integrity, but his heart was right. Absalom, on the other hand, was an impetuous, headstrong upstart who cared more for himself than anyone else. He could not be trusted. His words, while powerful and effective, were deceitful and ungodly. Nothing Absalom had planned or put into action had been done with God's guidance or approval. He had acted according to his own wicked heart. His motives had been purely selfish and driven by revenge against David. It's interesting to note that years later, Solomon would write a proverb addressed to his son. Perhaps he had his own brother Absalom in mind when he penned these words: "My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words. Don't lose sight of them. Let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them, and healing to their whole body. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Proverbs 4, verses 20 through 23. Centuries later, Jesus, a descendant of David, would pick up on this same theme. "But the words you speak come from the heart. That's what defiles you. For from the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. These are what defile you." Matthew 15, verses 18 through 20. Absalom's actions reveal the condition of his heart. His words condemn him. And his words, while initially the cause of his rise to power, would be the reason for his demise.